Did that black waitress just spill wine on my $1,000 shoes? You people were made to serve. He didn't whisper it. He wanted everyone to hear. It was 8:43 p.m. at the Aurelia, one of Manhattan's most exclusive rooftop restaurants. The kind of place where deals are closed with a handshake and a $2,000 bottle of Bordeaux. And right there, beneath a ceiling of crystal light and privilege, CEO Tian Lei, a Chinese billionaire known for his ruthless rise in tech, snapped. A glass of red wine, Merlot, vintage 2011, had spilled onto his custom Italian loafers. A mistake. An accident. But instead of grace or basic decency, he turned, snarled, and slapped the young black waitress standing beside him. A sharp, humiliating sound. A second later, he was on the ground. No one saw her move. One moment he stood, drenched in ego. The next, he was flat on his back, gasping, one hand reaching for his neck, the other trembling in disbelief. And standing above him, Alana Brooks, 24. 6 years of waiting tables. A sociology major who knew more about power dynamics than the man who just tried to humiliate her. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. Next time, remember, not every black story ends in silence. That moment cracked open a conversation this country avoids far too often. How racism wears a suit, speaks multiple languages, and hides behind money and manners. The clip, all 14 seconds of it, hit the internet like a bullet. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit. Black Story became the top trending tag overnight. Not just because of the slap, but because of what followed. What you're about to hear isn't just a viral moment. It's the unraveling of a man who thought he was untouchable, and the rise of a woman who proved you don't need wealth to have power. Stay right here. Because the next 10 minutes will make you rethink what justice looks like. This is not just a headline. This is a black story that hits back. Before the slap. Before the headlines. Before the security footage turned her into a symbol, she was just Alana. Alana Brooks. 24. 5'7". Spirited brown eyes. A face people remembered but often overlooked. She grew up in Newark, New Jersey, in a one-bedroom apartment she shared with her mom and younger brother, Jalen. Her mom, Denise, worked long hours at a laundromat, came home smelling like dryer sheets and tired feet, but never too tired to check homework or reheat dinner. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Alana learned early how to speak softly but carry weight. At school, she was the quiet storm, the girl who aced tests, challenged teachers when they were wrong, and helped tutor kids no one else had patience for. She believed in justice before she even knew the word for it. By the time she hit college, she had plans. Big ones. A full ride to Rutgers, majoring in sociology. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be useful, maybe working in policy, community reform, or as a civil rights attorney. But life rarely unfolds according to plan. When Jalen's condition worsened, an autoimmune disorder that required constant treatment, everything changed. Medical bills piled up, her mother's health declined, and financial aid didn't cover prescriptions. So Alana did what she always did. She adapted. She paused school and took a job at the Aurelia, one of Manhattan's finest restaurants. She told herself it was temporary. Just until they caught up on bills. Just until her brother stabilized. At the Aurelia, she wore black slacks, polished shoes, and a crisp white shirt. She kept her curls tied back in a bun and wore a small gold cross from her grandmother. She walked fast, listened close, and remembered every regular's preferences down to how they liked their water. Chilled, no lemon. To the guests, she was a shadow. Efficient. Pleasant. Invisible when necessary. But behind that poised exterior was a young woman who read Baldwin on the subway and watched court hearings during her lunch breaks. She still wrote essays, just for herself now, about race, identity, and silent suffering. What they saw was a waitress. What she carried was resilience. Alana knew how the world looked at women like her. Smiled when dismissed. Bit her tongue when insulted. But that didn't mean she didn't feel it. Every slight, every microaggression, every time someone assumed she wasn't worth listening to. And that night, when Tian Lei looked at her like she was a nuisance, a mistake in human form, he didn't just meet a server. He met a storm wrapped in silk. The night started like any other. White linen tablecloths. Soft jazz from the corner trio. A hush of money in the air, the kind of atmosphere where people speak in half smiles and billion-dollar deals are sealed over dry-aged steak. Then, at 8:31 p.m., he walked in. Tian Lei, tech mogul, CEO of Zencor, the Chinese data security giant that just closed a contract with the U.S. Department of Defense. Net worth, somewhere north of $16 billion. Age, 49. Skin tight like polished stone. Eyes like cold glass. He didn't need to announce himself. His presence did that for him. First came the entourage, 4 assistants, each with tablets and Bluetooth earpieces, whispering schedules and flight plans. Then his translator, although Tian spoke English perfectly. And finally, 2 bodyguards in sleek gray suits who stood still as statues but scanned the room like hawks. Tian strolled in last, buttoning his midnight blue blazer like he was preparing for battle. The maitre d' rushed over, almost tripping over himself with the wine list in hand. Everyone noticed. Everyone always noticed when power walked into a room. But Tian didn't look around. He looked through people. Waitstaff, patrons, the musicians, all blurred into one silent, irrelevant backdrop. He wasn't there for dinner. He was there to be seen. That night, he took his usual table, corner booth, with the skyline view. He ordered without looking at the menu. Wagyu, rare. White truffle risotto. 1990 Chateau Margaux. Everything imported, everything expensive, everything designed to remind people just how far above them he lived. Then, the laughter began. Not the joyful kind, the condescending kind. Loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Directed at his translator, at his assistants, and eventually, at the woman walking toward his table. Alana. She didn't shake. Didn't blink. Just approached like she did every other guest, with professional ease and posture. She poured the water, offered the specials, and smiled politely. Tian stared at her like she was a novelty. Not a person. A thing. A disruption to his curated image. You know, in my country, people like her don't work in luxury restaurants. He said it to his translator, but loud enough for Alana to hear. A small smirk curled at the corner of his mouth. He wanted a reaction. She gave him none. But make no mistake, the air shifted. Somewhere between the clink of crystal and the jazz guitar, a storm had entered the room. And everyone in the Aurelia felt it. They just didn't know where it would strike. Yet, it started with a joke. The kind that doesn't land. The kind that wasn't really meant to be funny. You must be fast on your feet, probably used to running things back and forth, huh? Tian Lei said it with a chuckle, eyes fixed on Alana as she cleared a salad plate. The tone was light, almost teasing. But the smile never touched his eyes. He didn't see her flinch. Or maybe he did, and that was the point. She kept her expression steady. That's what working in fine dining teaches you, how to absorb microaggressions like they're part of the uniform. You pretend not to hear. You stay professional. You stay composed. But it didn't stop there. When Alana returned to offer wine, Tian raised an eyebrow and said, "Do you even know the difference between Pinot and Syrah?" One of his guests chuckled under his breath. The translator glanced away. Alana simply nodded. "Yes, sir. Would you prefer the 2015 Syrah or the 2018? Her voice was even. Her delivery flawless. But inside, her chest tightened. There's a kind of racism that doesn't shout. It whispers. It dresses itself in politeness and hides behind plausible deniability. Tian wasn't yelling slurs. He was doing something worse. He was testing how much he could get away with. You're very articulate, for someone in your position. Is English your first language? You don't look like most girls working in places like this." Each comment was coated in sugar. But Alana knew the taste, and it wasn't sweet. It was old, bitter, familiar. The kind of subtle bias black women face daily in elite spaces: doubted intelligence, assumed servitude, veiled surprise at competence. Still, she smiled, poured the wine, cleared the empty dishes. But when she turned her back to head toward the kitchen, her hand tightened around the tray. She had dealt with this before: the smirks, the assumptions, the belittling dressed up as banter. But there was something different tonight. Something colder. Tion wasn't just arrogant. He was deliberate, calculating. Like a man who had learned he could say whatever he wanted, wherever he wanted, because no one ever told him no. He was waiting for her to break character. He was waiting to see if the girl in the apron would slip. And what he didn't know, what no one in that restaurant knew, was that Alana didn't break. She chose when to strike. It happened in seconds. But it played out like slow motion. Alana approached with a bottle of Chateau Margaux, the label facing out, just like they trained her. She leaned in slightly, her arms steady, careful not to drip. Her eyes avoided Tion's this time. Not out of fear, out of choice. That's when it happened. A busboy rushing by clipped her side, just enough to throw off her balance. The wine tilted. A few drops, no more than 3, landed on Tion Lay's imported Italian loafers. Dark red on soft beige suede. The silence that followed was louder than a scream. Tion looked down at his shoes like someone had just defaced a monument. His nostrils flared. He slowly turned to Alana, eyes narrowed, mouth curling into something not quite a smile. "Of course," he muttered, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "This is what happens when you let people like her serve the rich." Alana stepped back. "I'm so sorry, sir. It was an accident. I can bring a towel." He didn't answer. Instead, he stood. And then, with all the entitlement money could buy, he slapped her. Right across the face. A sharp, open-handed blow. Not enough to knock her down, but enough to sting. Enough to shame. Enough to make a statement. The slap echoed. Not just in sound, but in shock. No one moved. A couple at a corner table dropped their forks. A wine glass tipped off a table and shattered. One waiter gasped. The jazz trio stopped mid-note. Alana stood frozen. Not because she was afraid, but because she was calculating, processing. The heat on her cheek wasn't just from the strike. It was from the years. The years of swallowing microaggressions, of being underestimated, of biting her tongue in places where people expected her to smile and shrink. She slowly raised her eyes to meet Tion's. There was no fear in them, only fire. He didn't just slap her skin. He slapped her story, her mother, her brother, her people, her dignity. And in that moment, Tion Lay made the most expensive mistake of his career. Not because of the cameras. Not because of the legal backlash. But because he picked the wrong woman to try and humiliate. And what he failed to realize, what everyone was about to learn, was that this story didn't end with her silence. It was just beginning. The moment after the slap hung in the air like smoke. Tion Lay stood tall, jaw tight, eyes locked on Alana like he'd just put a child in her place. He turned slightly, adjusting his cufflink, already looking away. The slap, to him, was finished. But for Alana, it was just the spark. Her hand still tingled. Not from pain, but from restraint. She looked at him. Not with fear, not with rage, but with something colder. Something sharper. Clarity. What Tion didn't know was that Alana had trained in Krav Maga for 3 years, not for violence, but for survival. What he didn't know was that behind the apron was a woman who had studied power structures, conflict de-escalation, and how to take down a man twice her size with half a second's notice. And now, she gave herself half a second. Alana didn't scream, didn't cry. She didn't run to the manager or threaten legal action. She took a single step forward. One deep breath. One pivot on her left heel. And with swift precision, she moved. Her hand reached across Tion's chest, grabbing the wrist of the arm he had used to slap her. She twisted, using his own momentum. In a blink, he was spun sideways, off balance, and slammed down onto the marble tile. His back hit the ground with a flat, echoing thud. A gasp rippled across the restaurant. The bodyguards moved. Too late. One stepped forward, hand reaching under his jacket. But Alana raised her voice for the first time all night. Step back. This man just assaulted me. And it's all on camera. The restaurant froze. Tion groaned on the ground, dazed. His ego more bruised than his spine. Alana didn't gloat. She didn't grandstand. She simply adjusted her sleeve, stood tall, and looked down at him with quiet control. Her voice was calm. Deadly calm. You want to act like I'm beneath you? You just learned how fast the floor comes up to meet you. That's when the clapping started. Soft at first. Then louder. Table by table. A ripple of applause breaking through the shock. Not because she was violent, but because she refused to be made small. In a world where women like her are told to take the hit and move on, Alana did something rare. She hit back, with dignity, precision, and unapologetic strength. And that moment would change everything. It only took 14 seconds. 14 seconds of shaky phone footage, captured by a tourist from Ohio sitting 2 tables away. He hadn't even meant to record. He was filming the skyline through the restaurant's glass wall when the slap cracked through the air like thunder. Instinct kicked in. He turned his phone. He caught it all. The insult. The slap. The takedown. The moment Tion's back hit the floor, and Alana's voice rang out like a gavel in a courtroom. By 10:17 p.m., the clip was on TikTok. By 11 o'clock, it was on Twitter. By midnight, it had 5.2 million views. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag stand with Alana. Hashtag not your servant. Hashtag black story. Hashtag Tion takedown. People weren't just watching the clip. They were sharing it. Commenting. Stitching it with their own stories. Black servers. Latina baristas. Asian cashiers. Everyone who'd ever been spoken to like they were invisible. Suddenly, they had a face, a moment, a rally cry. Alana had gone viral. But not the kind of viral that fades in 24 hours. The kind that sticks. The kind that starts a conversation. News anchors picked it up by morning. CNN ran a segment called Power, Race, and Public Humiliation. The Today Show called it a modern-day Rosa Parks moment. Fox News questioned if Alana had used excessive force. Social media didn't care. To the people, she was a symbol. A symbol of composure under fire. A reminder that dignity doesn't wear a suit, sometimes it wears an apron and non-slip shoes. Journalists flooded the Aurelia, but management refused interviews. Tion's legal team released a cold statement calling the incident a misunderstanding exacerbated by cultural differences. No apology. No remorse. But the court of public opinion had already made up its mind. Clips of Alana's takedown were now being set to music. Beyoncé, Kendrick, Nina Simone. Artists turned still frames into digital portraits. One went viral on Instagram, Alana standing over Tion, head held high, backlit by gold, with the caption, "Power is earned, not bought." Meanwhile, Alana stayed silent. She didn't post, didn't tweet, didn't seek attention. She just kept showing up for work, refusing interviews, clocking in like nothing had changed, even though everything had. But beneath that silence, something was growing. Not just fame. Movement. Because in a world obsessed with taking people down, Alana's rise reminded everyone that sometimes, justice fights back. The day after the video went viral, Alana walked into the Aurelia like she always did. Black shoes polished, apron crisp, hair pulled into a neat low bun. But the restaurant wasn't the same. It was quieter. The regular buzz of clinking glasses and polite laughter had been replaced by something sharper, the low hum of watching eyes. Some customers applauded when she passed their table. Others whispered behind their menus. A few just stared, like they weren't sure if they were looking at a server or a symbol. But the staff? They knew. The dishwasher gave her a fist bump. A hostess hugged her before clock-in. The pastry chef left a sticky note on her locker. Proud of you. Always have been. Still, not all the attention was welcome. By noon, a local protest had formed outside the restaurant. Half were there to support her, holding signs that read, "Alana for president," and "Silence is complicity." The other half, not so friendly. One man in a suit screamed, "She assaulted a foreign investor." Another shouted, "Race baiter." Cameras caught every second. Online, things got worse. Alana's old photos were pulled from her college Facebook page. People dug up everything from her GPA to a tweet she posted in 2016 about racial profiling. Conspiracy theories spun fast, that she was a plant, that she had staged the incident, that she was backed by political groups. She received death threats. Dozens. From anonymous emails. From burner accounts. One message read, "Watch your back, waitress." Some of us don't forgive that fast. The restaurant offered her paid time off. She declined. "I didn't do anything wrong," she told the manager. "I didn't start this. But I'll finish it." Standing up. Still, beneath the chaos, something powerful was taking root. People began telling their stories, quietly, loudly, everywhere. Servers, nurses, cashiers, interns. Black women in corporate offices. Asian women in beauty salons. Latino delivery drivers. The moment had grown bigger than Alana. She became the face of a feeling millions had buried for years. Not just the sting of disrespect, but the exhaustion of constantly being asked to take it, smile through it, and keep moving. And though the world was split, supporters and critics, praise and threats, one thing was undeniable. Alana had forced a spotlight where there had only been shadows. And she wasn't stepping out of it anytime soon. For the first 48 hours, Tian Lei stayed quiet. No press conferences. No apologies. No social media statements. Just silence. But silence doesn't stop curiosity. And in today's world, when people want answers, they dig. It started with a tweet. A junior reporter from a small independent outlet posted a thread titled, "Who really is Tian Lei?" It didn't go viral right away, but it caught fire in the right circles. Investigative journalists, whistleblowers, activists, people who had nothing to lose, and receipts. Within days, the facade began to crack. Turns out, Tian's story wasn't as clean as his press team made it out to be. Back in 2014, a former assistant, a black woman named Mia Howard, filed a complaint with Zencor's HR department. She alleged racial discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. Her claims included being called exotic, being passed over for promotions, and hearing comments like, "You people don't understand discipline." The complaint never made it to court. Mia left the company shortly after. Her NDA was airtight. But now, she was watching. And when she saw the video of Alana, she spoke. In an anonymous interview, she said, "I knew that man would eventually slip in public. He didn't respect women. He especially didn't respect black women. To him, we were background noise." More stories followed. A software engineer from Zencor's London office described a boys' club culture, where Tian regularly mocked accents, insulted junior staff, and bragged about his Western immunity, claiming his wealth protected him from American outrage. One intern said Tian once threw her resume in the trash during an interview, telling her, "Pretty girls don't need degrees. They need husbands." The internet connected the dots. Threads emerged. Timelines built. Articles resurfaced. A 2017 piece in a Chinese business journal hinted at internal lawsuits Tian had settled quietly. Another noted his connections with high-level political figures who kept him untouchable. But Alana changed that. Because when a man like Tian Lei lays a hand on a woman in public, and the cameras catch it, the world stops pretending. Suddenly, reporters who once called him a visionary were questioning his ethics. Investors started asking hard questions. His PR team scrambled. His board of directors held emergency meetings. Zencor's stock dipped, then dropped, then plummeted. The slap didn't just bruise Alana's cheek. It fractured his empire. And for the first time in his career, Tian Lei wasn't controlling the narrative. He was the story. As the public began to question Tian Lei, the walls around him started to crumble. Not because of journalists, but because of the people who used to sit just outside his office door. At first, it was just whispers. An anonymous post on Reddit from someone claiming to be a former Zencor employee. A LinkedIn status update from a project manager hinting at a toxic workplace. Quiet comments under breath on industry forums. But then came the first name. Danielle Cruz, a former senior developer who had worked at Zencor's New York satellite office for 4 years. She posted a video on Instagram, face uncovered, voice steady. I was called aggressive for leading meetings. I was told to smile more during presentations. I was the only woman of color in my department, and I had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. Her video hit 1 million views in 2 days. More followed. A former HR director admitted she had processed over 24 internal complaints against Tian, most involving racial bias, sexual harassment, or unethical business practices. All of them had been buried, settled, or dismissed. One whistleblower shared an internal memo from 2019 where Tian mocked a female engineer's idea in a meeting, calling it emotional nonsense, then pitched the same idea himself 2 weeks later. Another former employee revealed that Tian had once implemented a hiring freeze, but only for female applicants, saying, "The product doesn't need feelings. It needs results." The cracks were no longer subtle. They were wide open. News outlets ran exposés. Former interns, junior developers, executive assistants, even vendors, all began to speak up. Not just about Tian, but about a culture that protected him, a culture that rewarded silence and punished integrity. One former executive said, "We all knew. We just didn't think it would ever matter. We didn't think the outside world would care. But now the outside world did." Zencor's stock dropped another 15%. Government partners paused contracts. Shareholders demanded Tian step down. And through it all, Alana never said a word. She didn't need to. She had sparked something larger than herself. Her silence was louder than Tian's defense. Her restraint more powerful than his reach. The man who had built $1 billion empire on control was now watching it fall apart, one voice at a time. For almost 2 weeks, Alana Brooks said nothing. No interviews. No statements. No comments. While social media debated and headlines spun, and Tian Lei's empire unraveled in real time, she stayed quiet, not because she didn't have something to say, but because she knew that when she did speak, the world would finally listen. And then, one Friday morning, she walked onto the set of The View. No publicist. No glam squad. Just Alana, in a navy blue dress, natural curls, clear eyes. She sat across from the hosts, took a breath, and said the first words the world had been waiting to hear. "I didn't fight back to go viral. I fought back because no one else ever had the right to lay hands on me. Not at work. Not ever." The room fell silent. And just like that, her voice, calm, unshaken, began to echo beyond the screen. She talked about her mother. About growing up being told she had to work twice as hard. About her brother's illness. About walking into rooms where people assumed she was the help, even when she was the one in charge. And most of all, she talked about dignity. People think being strong means yelling, fighting. But sometimes, it just means not shrinking. Standing your ground. Not letting someone tell you what you're worth, and then believing them. She didn't bash Tian. She didn't need to. What made Alana powerful wasn't revenge. It was restraint, clarity, grace. By the end of the interview, the studio audience was on its feet. Tears, applause, people shouting her name. That afternoon, her phone rang non-stop. Publishers, brand deals, book agents, even Hollywood. She turned them all down. Instead, she partnered with a nonprofit that supports women of color in the service industry. She started a scholarship in her mother's name. She spoke at high schools and community centers, not about going viral, but about knowing your worth before someone tries to sell you short. She became more than a moment. She became a movement. Because what Alana understood, and what so many forgot, was that true redemption doesn't come from clearing your name. It comes from owning your story. And now, Alana's voice wasn't just echoing in interviews or hashtags. It was rippling through boardrooms, classrooms, dinner tables, anywhere someone once felt small and decided, not today. When the dust settled, the headlines faded, and the internet moved on to its next outrage, Alana Brooks remained. Not as a trend, not as a meme, but as a quiet force in a world that still doesn't quite know what to do with a woman who stands tall, especially when that woman is young, black, and unbothered by status. In the end, it wasn't about the slap. It wasn't even about the billionaire. It was about something bigger. Power, prejudice, and the moment you choose to no longer play small. Power, real power, doesn't always come with money or titles. It doesn't sit in corner offices or fly private. It lives in the decisions we make when no one expects us to fight back. It lives in our voice, and in our silence. Prejudice is trickier. It doesn't always show up in slurs or violence. Sometimes, it comes wearing a smile, hidden in compliments that feel more like jabs, wrapped in systems that were never built for fairness, just for function. And if you're not careful, you'll start to believe it, that maybe you are too loud, too angry, too much. But here's the truth Alana reminded us of. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to speak with weight. And you're allowed, no, obligated, to stand tall when someone tries to shrink you. The slap was a moment. But what came after? That was the movement. Alana didn't seek revenge. She never asked to be a symbol. She didn't monetize her pain or chase the spotlight. She simply said, no more. And that simple act, that refusal to be disrespected, reverberated across the world. From classrooms in the Bronx to courtrooms in D.C., people talked about it. Young girls in hair salons, servers in diners, students at lunch tables. Her story became more than just entertainment. It became a mirror. So here's the question. What would you do if no one stood up for you? Would you take the slap and walk away? Or would you stand, steady, and reclaim your voice? Because the truth is, we all face our own Tion Lei. Maybe not in a 5-star restaurant. Maybe not on camera. But somewhere, in our jobs, our schools, our daily lives, we'll be tested. And when that moment comes, remember Alana. Not because she fought back, but because she did it without losing herself. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember their power. And if you've ever felt like the world sees through you, know this, you're not invisible. You're undeniable. This was not just a black story. This was a human story. And it's only the beginning.